So I'm starting the recording, guys. Okay. Okay, so guys, we'll wait for 3 more minutes and then we'll start. So I think we should start now. So welcome everyone. I know it's a working day for all of you. So we'd like to thank you all for attending this session, taking out your time. And so on behalf of all the Chandigarh Tableau group core team, I would like to welcome you all to this session. And as you can see on the screen, a small trivia for all of you. This open hand is the symbol for Chandigarh, and it signifies the spirit to give and receive. So Tableau community is also based on the same principles and mantra. So yeah, taking that forward, we have this Tableau user group. We are a group of enthusiastic professionals who have come together to share our knowledge of Tableau and its products. We try to keep these meetings regular so that we can collaborate, learn, and yeah, originally we have these meetings in person so that we can network too. But due to the current situation, we are doing it online in a virtual mode. And yeah, sure, whenever we start back in person, we'll give you invites, and you all are welcome to come to the meetings, to the conferences we have. We also go for a team outing after that, a small lunch together. So it's a very good platform to network and share your ideas. So without wasting much of your time, I'll come to today's agenda. I think all of you are familiar about the speakers we have today. So we'll start with the advanced Tableau tips and tricks from Rahul, who's a director of business intelligence in Clickscient India. And he's been working in this Tableau for past many years now. And yeah, so over to you, Rahul. You can start
Okay,
now.
cool. Thanks, Varun. Hey everyone. I hope A very good evening, first of all, and I hope everyone is safe and staying healthy. Let me actually share my screen. So I have been working on Tableau for quite some years now.
Just one second, Rahul. I would request you all to type in your questions in the Q&A window. And the chat window is just for interacting amongst yourself. But for any questions, just give your questions in Q&A window. Thank you all. Yeah, sorry, Rahul. You can carry on now.
You heard the man. Okay, so yeah, so I have been working in Tableau for around like 7 or 8 years now. I think I started my career with testing, then went into development, then went into BI. Right now, I'm working with a company called Clickscient India. It's an analytics arm of Capitus, based out of New York. So what Capitus does is basically they give out loans to merchants. So I thought I'll probably cover a lending space domain in Tableau as well, because we consume Tableau in day-to-day almost every operation. And I would say for every strategic decision making or in every operations decision making, Tableau plays a key part in our day-to-day lives. So I have 2-point agenda today. I'll be discussing and sharing some examples how we have been using Tableau in the lending space. And then we'll cover some of the advanced tips that we can use in Tableau. So I'll start with Tableau in lending space. And guys, if you have any questions in between, as Varun said, just keep typing in the Q&A section. We have been using Tableau in our company for a long, long time now. And I don't remember, there was a time where we did not use Tableau. And we use we use Tableau starting with maybe right from the beginning, where we reach out to the customers in marketing, in acquisition, in defining our portfolio, checking our portfolio performance, delinquencies. So because it's a lending space, so there would be there are a lot of financial implications, and we have to move quickly. Whenever we know that there's a possible delinquency coming in, so it has to be very quick as well as strategic. So let me share some of the dashboards that we have been building. So if you can see my screen. So right from the basics, where are our customers coming from, which state, what is the, where are most of the merchants located, where we are giving out loans. So as you can see, most of the coastal regions, starting with California, New York, Texas, all these are the big customers where the customers reside. And then we also use Tableau to look at our portfolio distribution. How is our portfolio look like? If you can see on my right, I'm right now distributing it by risk bucket. So it could be, and there could be n number of parameters here, because we need to look at different cuts of the data to see where are we giving out money, what kind of customers are there, and what kind of firmography or geography is there, and how do we need to strategize that. So there can be risk bucket, there can be industry, because industry plays a big role when it comes to lending space. Essentially because there are certain types of industries which are more probable to go delinquent than the others. So there are some safe industries, there are some not so safe. So that's why it's very and it falls right into the strategic decisions when we go for funding. Then we have some other parameters, like, so if I click on industry, you will be able to see which are the most prominent industry here. Clearly, construction is one. And similarly, then you can go to look at factor rate, FICO score, age of business, payment frequency is another. So payment frequency means, what kind of repayments are we getting? So what kind of loan, how the loans are structured. So we have like daily and weekly repayments. So, and bi-weekly as well, which is a small percentage, but essentially this is how we look at our customers and our portfolio using Tableau. And there can be some other cuts as well. I mean, you can define as many as cuts you want, but the ones that mostly matter to us are, I'm sorry, let me go back here first. So the most which matter to us are these, and there can be many others as well. Then moving on, we see by payment status. So payment status, as in how many of our current customers are in have been repaying, or have already repaid, or are settled, discounted, or have been delinquent. So you can see here for the past. I mean, obviously the numbers are anonymized, so this is not the exact data, but this will give you a picture of how it's being used. So we see here, and we keep a tab on, how much of our portfolio is into delinquency, how much is into settled, or how much has been repaid, to strategize further. Then we come to portfolio performance. I'm sorry, I'll be covering them I'll be giving an overview of each of these. But if you have any questions to go into detail, just keep posting in the Q&A. Then we have portfolio performance. So here we look at how our portfolio has been performing by quarter. So each of these lines represent a quarter in a given year. So that means that, let's say, for all the loans that we gave out in Q1 of 2018, we have got around 125% returns on that. And similarly, for Q3, it's been 122%. If you look at the recent one, 2020 Q2, it's been, obviously, it's not been too many months now, but it's 14%. So one of the key insight here is you can see that around, so where do we hit break even? We hit break even somewhere between 10 and 15 here. So, and we reap the profits thereafter. So if this line is going, the slope of this line is decreasing, that's an alarm for us. That's a trigger for us to basically see if more number of customers or merchants are going delinquent. So here you can see day-to-day operations, how we are using Tableau in terms of monitoring our portfolio. Then we have actual versus expected. So here we saw an absolute picture, how we are reaping back the loans. Here is what we expected versus what's happening. So you can see this is again by quarter and year. So if you go by the line charts that we see here, what percentage of actual or what percentage of expected amounts that we are getting with the months that are passing by. So when we are still into 5 months of the contract or the deal, or the loan, we are approximately around 100 on 110% of the expectations. So everything is going good. But as soon as the loan tenure or loan matures into the later months, we see a drop in the performance. So people either stop paying or they go bankrupt or something like that. So those are the kind of metrics that we track here. And if you see, the drop happens somewhere around a ninth month, 8th or 9th month. So we have to be very careful, and we should monitor our progress or portfolio, especially on these months of a contract. So this is a key takeaway when we look at this graph. So so what we covered till now is, we talked about how we see our customer profile acquisition, and then we also check our portfolio, how we track our performance. But we also track some of the macroeconomic parameters, such as the yield curve. So the graph that you're seeing on the screen is actually the US Treasury yield curve. The lines here represent the interest rates that the US government gives out on the various tenures of the bonds. So starting with 1 month, 2 months, and then goes up to 1 year, 2 year, up to 30 years. So what happens is when any of these when these interest rates converge, that is the interest rate on 1 month is equals to 30 year, then people stop purchasing long-term bonds and start purchasing short-term bonds. So in that case, this conversion happens here, which is right now happening, and that triggers our economy into recession. That's what's happening right now. So whenever you will see these lines are converging, and this data is available on the US government website, you can go to data.gov.com and you can see this yield curve data. And you'll be able to see and track if the recession is coming. So this is one of the parameters that how we track, and we need to be careful with our lending. So we need to be very conservative when it comes to recession. For example, now, so we narrowed down our industry. We narrowed down we give out loans to very particular and maybe only renewals, but only conservative industries. So that's how we do use Tableau in the lending space. And again, I cannot emphasize more how beneficial it has been for us using Tableau in both operations and strategic terms. So that covers the first part of the agenda. Okay, and all these slides covers everything what we discussed. The second part of the agenda was to discuss the advanced tips for Tableau users. Okay, so the first tip that I'm going to show here is how we can create flowcharts in Tableau or schema diagrams in Tableau. So the kind of diagram that you see here in this PPT is right now it's pointing from one table to the other, showing how the tables are related in terms of primary and foreign keys. So what if you want to build this in Tableau? So Tableau right now, though it doesn't have the exact arrows in the dashboard, but there are several workarounds and ways where you can build this. So let's go to Tableau workbook and see how we can build this. So there are, so I've mentioned two ways to do this here. One is BG, that is changing the background. The second is annotations. let's see how each of these work. So I'm doing this on Tableau public. So, and I'll also send you the link of Tableau workbook here, and you can download and see for yourself. So what we have here is a dashboard which contains all these tables, and there are arrows in between. The BG means that it's using a background. So each of these tables is a worksheet. So if I open any of one of these, let's say I go to employee, it takes me to a sheet where I have entered the columns here. Okay, and similarly, department is another table, and then jobs, location, and job history are all tables. And each one of these, they can come from a same data source or they can come from different data source. It doesn't matter, because the relationship that will be showing here will be independent of that. So you can connect disjoint data sources as well here. Now, what this arrows are, this is basically a background image. So what we did was we placed an image in the background here. If you go to the layout section and go to and open all the containers. So below you can see here there is an image background arrows.png, which is basically the arrows that you see here. So if I can show you, it has a floating image. Let me see. Okay, here it is. So this is the image I'm using. So there is one challenge here, though. Whenever there are changes in your flowchart, here is schema, but there can be many other use cases where you need to, for example, if you're monitoring some kind of queues and looking at data, how they are moving from one queue to the other, you might find yourself in a challenge that you will have to keep changing these arrows according to how your queue moves. So for those kind of cases, it might become a little difficult, as well as it's a little creative on the same time. So when I say creative, because the way we built this kind of image is we take the snapshot of the dashboard, we draw on the, snapshot as an image. So the snapshot of the dashboard as an image, and then we draw on top of that, and then we delete the tables and we keep only the plain image here. So, and then we use that image as a background, which happens to look like this. So it's a good workaround. We had a use case earlier where we wanted to monitor some of the processes, and we wanted to show the relationships on the dashboard, and that's how we came up with this idea that we can use the background image as the process flow. So this is one example how we can. Again, I would say this is a little bit creative. I mean, you might need to do this in Paint or something, but it's one way to do this. The other way to do this is through annotations. It's more Tableau. So all you need to do is, when you have these tables on your dashboard, and right now it's floating all these tables, but you can keep them in the tagged containers as well. So I mean, the use case that we had was using the tiled version of this, but this one is actually floating. All these tables are floating. So what we did here was we, instead of using a background image, we used a background sheet here. So the background that you see here is actually a sheet So if you see sheet 6 here, this has all those arrows that we just saw. And the arrows that we are seeing here is basically the arrows of the annotation. So when I click any of these arrows, the annotations will reveal themselves. So basically, you can edit your annotation and you can format them. So what I've done is I've formatted them to look like an arrow or a line, and I've hidden the box. So that's how this is the another way how we can do this kind of workflow, this kind of process flow. So if I go to the dashboard back, I can see that all these arrows are still clickable. So what you can do is you can maybe create another sheet of. I don't think you would need to. Um, so if you click on any of these, you can still drag them and reposition them. So whenever any of your queues move, you can basically move these annotations to down or left or right pretty easily, I would say. And so there's less, if you have something which is more dynamic in nature, I think this would be way to go. If you have something which is more structured already, and you might not be doing any changes soon, so in that cases, the background image is the way to go. Okay. So that covers our first step, which is how you can create the process flows or the flow charts in Tableau with using the background image and the annotations. Moving on. So this is the second is dynamic multiple reference lines. So many times we need to create multiple reference lines. I mean, we can do that, but what if those reference lines are dynamic in terms of that the data frequently changes, or let's say, for example, consider this data where this is coming from transactional data of financial transactions, and each of the reference lines here shows a fraud alert when it was it sent out a fraud alert. So in those kind of cases where it can change anytime, and you can't really add new reference lines every time for every customer, these kind of dynamic reference lines will come in handy. So I'll go to the Tableau workbook here. Okay. So you can see here that, just a second. Okay, so yeah. So these are the dynamic reference lines. So, and below is the chart, which is basically showing all the transactions of a customer. So when I click on any of these reference lines, it shows me what data is underlying, what was the date. We can even add the transaction number here. We can even add the transaction amount here. So those all things we can add here. But essentially what it shows me is how we can add these reference lines in the existing graph. So let's go to the sheet and see how it's being done. So if you can see here, clearly this is a dual axis chart. So one of the chart that you can see here is the line graph, which again is a left axis. And the other one, which you're seeing as a reference line, is actually on the chart on the right axis, which I've hidden right now. The reference line here is actually a bar chart. So what we have done here is we have added the bars and decreased their size to the minimum to be so that they look like as the reference lines. And we have also decreased the or fixed the axis on the right so that it always goes up to the top. Let's say this value is 1, fraud alert 1. So the right axis would be 0 to 1 so that it goes up to right at the top. So that is how we have built multiple reference lines chart, which is dynamic in nature. And it will change as and when the data is changing. So if you change the data here, let's see. So I'm going to remove the data and I'm going to add them again. So if you look at the range of data for, let's say, last 3 months, we get only one fraud alert here. However, if you see for, let's say, 6 months, we get another one. And similarly, for 12 months, we have third. For 20 or let's say 24 months, which is 2 years, we have around 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 reference lines. So 8 fraud alerts. So you can add these references as and when you want. You won't have to add them manually. So that's one kind of use case where, and there can be multiple use cases here as well. Whenever you want to trigger something, or let's say if you want to track something which goes beyond a certain level, and you want to add a dynamic reference lines there, you can add them here. And the second is similarly the fraud alerts that we have here. Okay, so that covers our second topic. Okay, we are moving a little bit fast here so that we can cover all of them. And then the third one is the dynamic quadrant. I'm sure you must have seen the quadrants already in Tableau, how quadrants are being built using Tableau. For example, let's say Gartner, Magic Quadrant, or any other. So I'm showing you right now is basically Crawlic matrix, which is used in supply chain. So here we are defining how a company should monitor its products and position its products with respect to the profit impact and the supply chain. So if you see here, we have 4 quadrants. The first one is leverage, then there's strategic, routine, and there's bottleneck. So on the left axis, we have profit impact. On this second axis, we have x-axis, we have supply risk. So where we have high profit impact and low supplier risk, we are leveraging those products. Those are those can be called as cash cows. So we don't have much risk. We already have an established market as such. The second quadrant, which is strategic, where we don't have that kind of profit. We have that kind of profit, but we also have supply risk. So those kind of products fall into strategic. And then we have routine, that we something like a commodity like milk, bread. And then we have bottlenecks, where we have less profits but more supply risk. So goods like maybe heavy goods or machinery can fall into this. So we are defining here how to define or categorize this metrics. So we have defined the one of the parameter here. So I'll want to cover the quadrant, how to make a quadrant. I think I would assume you have already seen this, but I'll quickly cover it. Like I'll give an overview. So on the left, on the y-axis, I have discount or the profit impact. I'm sorry, on the rows we have profit, and on the bottom we have supply risk. So what we're doing here is we have added the category of product. So this is a different kind of product. Every category is different. And what we have done is we have created two. What we have created is we have created a quadrant color. Where is that? Okay, quadrant color, which is basically checking. So before that, actually, so we have also created two parameters, profit and supply risk, which basically is these lines that you see. These are the reference lines. And what we're doing here is we are having these two reference lines cut over each other to form these quadrants. And these reference lines are being created from these parameters. Also, we are using these parameters limits or boundaries to create quadrant colors. So quadrant color is, whatever is less than this much profit and greater than this much supply risk will fall into first quadrant, and so on and so forth. Okay. So this is how we have designed the quadrant. So till now, it's pretty usual. The quadrant is what we have been building all the time. But what if we want to move these lines to see what all products will fall into what quadrant if we move these lines or change our parameters in terms of profit or supply risk? So in those kind of cases, we'll need to either input the parameters, or what we can do is we can do a dynamic quadrant. So what we have done here is basically we have added action in the dashboard. So if I go to the, if we go to the dashboard here, go to dashboard actions, you see that there are two actions here on the parameters. So discount is actually the supply risk. I would just rename this. Okay. So what we are doing here is we are adding those parameters. The kind of parameter that we selected here is we are going to action and select the action called change parameter, and then select the target parameter. So for profit, we have chosen the profit impact or the profit ratio. And we have also selected the field here, where which field should it pick from the parameter value. And similarly, we have supply risk, and which field should it be picking the parameter value. Okay. So whenever we click any of these products, it'll make the it will change the baseline of this matrix to that point. So let's see, what happens if we click this product. So let's see. So when we click this product has come into the third quadrant here, and it essentially changed how we were looking at the metrics before. Now let's see if I click on this parameter. Now there is no parameter on the strategic quadrant. We only have these three quadrants active now. Similarly, if we click on any of these product, it will keep on changing all those all these quadrants accordingly. Like whatever we select, it will change those quadrants, and it'll show those products that fall into those quadrants. So we can dynamically change that, and you can also again, I mean, we can enter the date here, and we can paginate it, and we can create an animation. Like if we add the date here, let me see if we have date. We have month. Okay. So if we add month here in the pages and go back to our dashboard, and click play. So it'll also show, based on this particular quadrant limits, how our products were changing over the time. So it's a great way to visualize your data, your inventory, as well as um, your orders. So and that's, and you can also strategize based on what if I moved this, what if I'm able to uh, shift my profit or shift my risk, then how many of these products are going into which quadrant, and then we can strategize accordingly. So that covers our three Tableau tips. And I'll be taking, so I know you've okay, so we basically, if you have any questions, I'll be taking those, and what we can do here is, if there's any question that we cannot answer right now, we'll get back to you. But I think, so we will conclude our Tableau tips here, and I'll give the control right over to Varun.
So Rahul, we have a couple of questions. So one is from Vinay. It's like, are we calling a multi-reference line? There was a concept about multi-reference line you showed.
Yeah.
So he wants
Okay,
some clarity on that.
Yeah, let me. Okay, I'm looking at the questions. Are we calling it as multi-reference, as time is referenced by spend or alert? What? Okay, I'm not very clear about the question here.
So before that, there is one more question actually. So he wanted a scenario where you have to use that flow diagram, right? In Tableau, where you have to
Oh, I
show
see.
using a
Okay.
flow diagram.
Yeah.
Not other
Yeah.
tools he wants.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're using Tableau for all your operational needs, and for example, you have to monitor different queues, let's say. So let's say your deal is going from one queue to the other, and you want to monitor how many contracts are going from one queue to the other, and you want to see it in a relationship. So queue, you can understand it as a stage. So when you're talking about a deal moves from one stage to the other. So you'll be able to see how those deals are moving from one stage to other, or it's jumping stages or something like that. So there can be number of other use cases. This is just one, but anything which has a flow diagram or even flow chart can be used to build it into Tableau. I won't say that flow chart are ideal use cases here, but certainly which is something which is more operational, something like, where a deal moves between the stages and you want to monitor those. I think that can be a pretty good use case here.
So we have another question about the fraud alert line.
Yeah.
So can you just show that how it was made again?
Okay. Okay, so this line is basically has been created as a graph only. So when you say so it's a dual axis graph. So the one graph underlying which the green line is is basically all the is the base graph, which is all the transactions. And on the top, what we have here is the fraud alert, which is again the same data, but only on some of the dates. So let's say on 1st of June, we had a bigger transaction that happened in another country, so that can be flagged as a fraud alert. And we want to show that as a line here, and we want to show all those lines as triggers on the graph. So what we can do is we can collaborate. I mean, we can drop bar here, and we can decrease the size of the bar to the minimum, so that it only appears as a reference line, and we can and that actually captures all those events which we want to monitor. So we won't have to do add multiple lines here. We can capture all those events just by adding this graph.
Okay. So we have another question. So Avinash wants to know how you got that symbol, the symbol for frauds, like a red one, right? Yeah, these symbols.
So, sorry, the crawlic matrix?
No, this dollar symbols and.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Tableau repository
Okay.
ones. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So these are coming from shapes. So you can also define your own shapes. So what happened here is you can find all the default shapes that come with Tableau. But let's say if you want to add more shapes here, what you can do is go to Documents. So you go to Documents, go to My Tableau repository, and then Shapes. Shapes, you will find all those categories that you see here, default, fill, arrows, bars, bug tracking, and such. And then create another folder here. I created quadrant, and then added 4 images here. Those 4 images will show up here. And then you can assign those images to whatever you select on the data item on the left. You can select which item you can assign, which image you can assign to which data item. So that's how, you will need to click on the reload shapes here to assign all of these to on the left.
This can be useful while customizing your dashboards.
Yeah. So if you have something which, you cannot accurately depict using existing shapes, you can, download shapes and import those shapes in your dashboards.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any other question?
Just one left, I think. Does Tableau support data modeling?
I think Tableau has a different product, Tableau Data Prep, which support that kind of modeling, but not on the extent where we can do predictive. Only till the extent where we can do data massaging and data blending, apply some filters, create some calculated fields. So, and then you can, the result of that model can actually be fed to Tableau Desktop or Tableau Online as a data source. So it's a different product, but it's there. There's another, I would say, functionality in Tableau. So if you go to edit Tableau data source, so now it's more of a relationships than the tables here. So if you double click on orders, you'll find that the underlying table is actually here. Orders is more of a relationship, and you can build relationships with other tables here without specifying the actual joins. So the joins will actually happen here at this level, in the table level. But on the outer side, when we have, let's say we have sales here or we have products here, then those can be combined into very loose relationships, which are easier to, I mean, which are less hard coded and won't have limitations like you can only aggregate the secondary data source. So there won't be any secondary data source in relationships, but you'll be able to use both, I mean, all the fields from both the tables. All right. What else do we have?
Any other questions? I think we have one. What value parameter are intersecting each other and why?
Oh, okay. So I think he's talking about the quadrant. So these are the reference lines that we built, and the parameters that we are using here is basically one on the profit impact and another on the supply risk. So we added these two reference lines based on these two axes, but we are controlling these um, reference lines based on the parameters. So when I click on any of the product here, it basically the action actually changes the value in my parameter. And since these reference lines are built on top of that parameter, those reference lines also move, and that's how the quadrant change.
I see people have posted their questions onto chat. So guys, I would suggest you to put up your question under the Q&A section.
So one more question. How do we refresh data on daily basis?
I mean, that depends how you're connecting your data. For example, if you're directly connecting with a live connection to SQL or let's say a database, then it can be auto refreshed whenever there's a change in the data. Just make sure that you do not convert it to an extract. If you're converting it to extract, you'll need to schedule the refresh on Tableau Online or Tableau Server, wherever you are hosting the dashboards. Other ways you can do refresh your data is basically using some data blending tools or using Tableau Prep. Tableau Prep also kind of work on the same principle as this, several other data blending tools like Alteryx. But essentially, you can schedule and you can create workflows, create dynamic fields, apply formula, and then give out a blended or a final data source in the output, which then you can use. So you can schedule all that workflow so that you can keep that refreshed in your Tableau workbook. So there can be, I mean, again, I'll say it depends on how you're connecting to your data. All right.
So there is one question from Prashant asking, does Tableau Prep come as a part of Tableau desktop license, or do we need to purchase it separately?
To my knowledge, it comes separately.
No, so
no, actually it comes as a part.
Yeah. So
now, if you have a creator license, you can always install
Okay.
Tableau Prep to your system.
Oh, great! I didn't know that.
So it comes as one single license for desktop prep and a single license to publish onto the server as well. So it is a Tableau creator license, what they call it.
I see. Okay. Good to know. All right.
Any other questions, guys?
So I don't see any questions. So guys, just to add, currently Tableau is providing free e-learning for 3 months. So you could register it till June month's end. So it is free. Also, they have got lot of content on their site, e-learning portal. Also, they have got a discount going on onto their one of the certifications. So any of you interested could go and register for the certification or go through that course which they have put up on e-learning portal.
How to register?
Varun, should we
So
take a short break before we start for another session?
yeah, sure. I think
Yeah.
10 minutes would be sufficient. And
Okay.
okay, so we'll take a break, guys, and we'll share the link for the e-learning just right now in a few minutes. Sure. Prashant, for certification, we do have a sample question bank in the website itself. You can try on that.
Meanwhile, Varun, can you move your story to contact us part? Yeah. So guys, whoever has joined. So if you are interested in presenting or being a part of this community, you could contact any of one of us. We'll add you. We have a group on WhatsApp. We'll add you there. We also have a group on Telegram. So we could add you there as well. Anyone interested in being a part of the community by way of presenting or just contributing in whatever way they can. So you could reach out to us directly.
Okay, guys. So I think many of you are asking about the e-learning links. I'll just show you.
I have pasted the link onto group chat. Varun will just start sharing his screen and show you what
Yes.
to do and how to
So
register.
if you go to the link, you'll have to register on the Tableau site. It'll just take your name and your address and other details. Then you can start learning, and you'll also get the batches as you complete these. As you go further and complete the course. Plus, after this, you'll be able to attempt, the first certification, Tableau desktop certification. You can attempt that, and you are getting a 50% off on that too for a few days now. I think the offer will expire on June 30 for that too. So currently, you can get your first level of certification of Tableau at $50. Otherwise, it's $100.
So for this e-learning, anytime you register till 30th, from that day your 90 days would start. So you could, if you think you are busy right now, you could register it right away and start learning next month or so, whenever you get time to do that.
And you can always, practice the Tableau dashboards and publish it in Tableau Public. So that would also give you a chance to participate in various Tableau competitions that are held. So you may be selected for Monday makeover or something else, and your account will be published all over the Tableau site and community. And also I have shared the Treasury, US Treasury data, which was showed by Rahul. You can always go to the site and copy paste this data into a CSV or whatever you want to, in whichever format you want to see it.
I think it is a great solution if for those who are starting to learn Tableau. So you could build up your
Yes.
Tableau public profile. So it would be something similar to a resume. So whenever there are jobs, so uh, every person hiring right now for a Tableau role definitely asks you for your Tableau public library. So it is your own account. You could showcase your development skills over there. I think we
Correct.
can start with
Yeah.
Bhavya session now.
So I hope you found this session useful. Now we'll move on to our other speaker, Bhavya. So she is the associate lead technology in Nagarro, and she is also has experience in Tableau and various other data visualization tools. She has done permission. She has the experience of maintaining Tableau server too. So we welcome you, Bhavya, on behalf of our community.
Thanks, Varun. Hi, everyone.
And yes, I
Let me
think you
share
can
my
take over
screen.
now.
Okay, is my screen?
Uh, Bhavya, currently I'm unable to see your screen.
Okay.
It's all blacked out.
Hi, everyone. Yeah.
Bhavya, are you sharing your screen?
I don't think so. She stopped her screen sharing. She was encountering. Yeah, so now we can see your screen, Bhavya.
Bhavya, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. So Varun has already given my introduction. So currently I'm working with Nagarro and working as a BI analyst. Have previously worked with Ericsson and EXL service. So today I intend to deliver a presentation on Tableau server permissions. And before going with the presentation, I would like to share something about the security or what is the need of the permissions. So security is a very crucial, security plays a very crucial role in the Tableau server. And we can say that it is very robust, very comprehensive. And because in order to maintain the security, we have different aspects of permissions, different approaches. So it is also very confusing. So before we start, I would like to explain the 4 components for that. First would be authentication, which plays an important role in security, authorization, data security, and network security. So here, authorization will be the main thing. We will focus on authorization. And okay, so before going with the presentation, I would explain what is authorization. Authorization determines that who can see the content on Tableau server. Content would be any entity on a Tableau server, or if we talk about the workbooks, the dashboards, that is the views, the projects, or the data sources. So who can see the content and how they interact with the content. Permissions and the site roles, both of them play a very important role in determining the authorization. But here in this presentation, we will be covering just the permissions part. Site roles, maybe we can cover in the next session. So here, this presentation, it fundamentals, then we'll go for the capabilities and the rules, the key elements of Tableau server, what is a default project, then locking mechanism on the project. Then there's a functionality of show or hide sheet tabs. Then we'll go to the workgroup database in the PostgreSQL, which defines the permissions. We have specific tables for the permission and the key takeaways, which we can capture at the end of the presentation. So let's start with the first thing, the fundamental roles. These capabilities, they are included in the permissions. So permissions, again, play a very important role in the authorization. So it allows us to know who can interact with the data and how they interact with the data. So before we exactly go into the details, hello?
Hello, Bhavya, we
Yeah,
can't see your screen.
yeah, please, Varun, please let me know if there's some issue, yeah. So currently I'm here in the rules and capabilities slide. So should I go to the
Yes.
previous ones? Okay, let me know.
Yes, actually, we didn't hear. So I think there is some connectivity issue too.
Okay.
You can start now, Bhavya. Hey,
This is your third time I'm कहाँ है यार पूरा स्क्रीन शेयर करने में just a minute, there's some issue with the network, I believe.
I can see your screen, Bhavya.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was some issue with the network consistently. Yeah, sorry for the inconvenience, guys. I'll start with the security part because permissions play a very important role in security, and security is a very crucial thing in the Tableau server concept. Okay, so before we start with the security, we should understand that it is very robust, very comprehensive, and it has different aspects. Like adding security to Tableau server has a lot of approaches, which includes permissions also. And that is why we'll deal with the permissions part here in this presentation. So there are mainly 4 components for security: authentication, authorization, data security, and network security. This presentation, it mainly focuses on the authorization. So authorization, it means that who can see the content on the server. The content could be like the workbooks or the projects or the data sources which are being published, and how the people who have the permissions or the capability to see the content, how they interact with it. So in Tableau, the authorization that is determined by the permissions and the site roles. But here we will just cover the permissions part. Site roles, we can capture it in the next presentation, in the next session. So this presentation, it encompasses the following topics. First would be the fundamentals. We'll discuss what permissions are. Then the rules and the capabilities being offered, the key elements of Tableau server, understanding the default project, what is locking mechanism in a project, a functionality of show or hide sheet tabs, then the tables in the workgroup database in PostgreSQL, and the key takeaways at the end. So what are permissions? So permissions, like we have understood with the authorization concept, permissions are things like the capacity to save a workbook, to download a workbook, to web edit it, to connect to a data source, to download the data, to export a PDF or export an image or the data. So these are the permissions granted to the users. And permissions, they apply to either a particular user, a single user, or a group of users for a particular content. By content, every time I refer to the workbooks, projects, or the data sources. We do not define permissions in vacuum, like without any relevance. We always try to give the permissions in context of the content, like applying the permissions on a project. Yeah. So before we start with the permissions on the contents, we should understand the rules and capabilities of the permissions. So when we go to the server, after we publish something, a particular workbook, so we see that we have certain selections for the configurations, the permission configurations available to us. And these include examples like project lead, interactor, viewer. And whenever any of these is selected, we get empowered with a list of capabilities. Like suppose if there is a project lead, then the project lead is being empowered with a set of capabilities to either view it or or save the workbook. So these are the rules. Now, when we talk about the capabilities, so these are the intrinsic controls or intrinsic capabilities being offered whenever a particular rule is being assigned. So we have the capabilities like to view it, to save a workbook, to download, to maybe filter the content, to interact with the content. So these are the capabilities. The key elements are the projects, workbooks, and the data sources. And we'll discuss these topics in the upcoming slides. So if you see here, so we have a screenshot of a project here. And when we go to the permissions tab, we see that we can assign permissions to a project highlighted in green, to the workbooks in blue, and the data sources in purple. And below, if you see here, Encircled in orange is the capability to add a rule. Like I said, rules can be given to a particular user or a group of users. And whenever a rule is applied to a group, it means all the users within that group will have that capabilities or the permissions. So by default, if you see here in the example highlighted, the data school, by default, everything is, the permissions are set to none, means nothing has been specified. So in order to provide the permissions, you will have to click on the drop downs, select the permissions, and then assign it to the relevant user or group. So we start with the project permissions. So for providing permissions on the project, we have the following permissions highlighted here: a viewer, publisher, project leader, none, or denied. So let's discuss this in detail. The viewer of the project, it means the user or the group of users which has been assigned the viewer permission, they can either view the workbook or the views in the workbooks. And all these are pertaining to the project for which the permission is being assigned. Then comes the publisher. Here we have the capability to publish the workbooks as well as the data sources to the server. Then we have the project leader. So the project leader has all the permissions, has the permissions for all the items or all the contents in the project. The permissions like refreshing the schedules or maybe changing the workbook or the data source owner. So this is also important, like suppose if somebody is leaving the company, then we should ideally change the owner of the workbook or the data source. So the project leader has the permission to do that. The project leader can also lock the permissions for the project. So these are the mainly permissions which are applicable for all the contents. Then we have none. None, it means that nothing has been specified, no permission has been specified. Denied means the permissions which have been, the capabilities which have been set, they are denied. So here we see that in this particular project, when we go to the permissions, here by default, we have all users group, and the permissions assigned are publisher. For the project, workbook, we have interactive, and then data sources, we have connector. Then we see on the right-hand side, we have a functionality of we have a functionality of locking mechanism, which we'll discuss in the upcoming slides. So that is also provided to the project leader. Then we have below here, if you see, we have the option of adding the rule. Rule means this is a rule, adding the permission to the project, which will include the capabilities of viewing it or saving it. Again, interactor, it means you can interact with the workbook. So these are the rules, I mean, here as an example, these are the rules applicable for the all users group. Here, if you see, if you click on this icon here, under the section of project, it will go into details. And for the publisher, we see that we have two capabilities being offered: to view, to save. And there is one more, project leader, which does not fall under the publisher permission. That is why it is not selected. So when we click on the ellipsis here, along with the provided here with the user or the group here, so we can see that we can edit it, or we can even delete the permissions here or the rules here. So for the project, when you click on the selection, on the drop down, we can see for selection, we have the following permissions, and corresponding to the selection, the following capabilities here on the right-hand side will be reflected. So here we see that because publisher is selected, so we have these two capabilities being offered along with the publisher permission. The next content, the key content, is the workbook. So for workbook, we have the following permissions: a viewer permission, interactor, editor of the workbook, none, and denied. So going in detail, the viewer permission can view the workbook or the views on the server. Then here comes the interactor. Interactor means the user or the group can view the workbooks or the views available and interact completely. Like interaction can include editing it, applying the filters, viewing the data, exporting the images. Then comes the editor. Editor is like a developer which has all the capabilities, all the permissions for the workbook. None means nothing has been specified, and denied means the capabilities which have been set, they are denied for this particular workbook. So this screenshot explains the permissions applied in the workbook here. So when you click on the permissions tab here, we see it is disabled here because of security reasons. So whatever user or group is selected for the rule, these are the rules being offered, the rules being set. And corresponding to the selection, these capabilities have been selected. So here we see that it is for the interactor. If we select the interactor, then we will have these filter, download, share, web edit, view permissions all being set for the interactor permission. Similarly, if we set to none, then nothing will be highlighted here. All the capabilities will be unchecked or unselected. Then comes the next content, that is a data source. For data source, we have 4 permissions: the connector permission, the editor permission, none, and denied. So connector permission means that the group or the user can connect to the data source on the server. We can publish the data sources either in embedded form in the workbooks or independently on the server. So if we have connector permissions, then the user or the group can connect to the data sources. If we have the editor permission, it means we can connect, we can download, we can delete the sources, or we can set permissions on the server. And also we can change the existing connection information. And if there is a scheduled on the server, on the extract, we can refresh that. None, it means the same for all the entities, for all the content. None means there is no permission specified, and denied means the permissions which have been selected, which have been set, they are denied. So apart from the permissions which have been provided there, we can even fine tune the permissions. Fine tuning the permissions would mean that as per our need, or as per the need of playing with the workbook or playing with the content, we can have the need to customize the permissions available, which means we can create additional permissions which have been which are available along with, apart from the preset options. And then we will see that, like example, if you see here, suppose if we have selected our publisher permission, along with that, if we want some other capabilities also, we will select on these checkboxes, and then it will have a customized permission. So this means that as per our requirement, we can even create custom permissions, which would mean fine tuning a permission for the need. So on the basis of these configurations, we should understand the tips which are helpful for configuring the environments, which would mean like whenever we create a rule, which means assigning the permissions to a user group, we should always keep in mind that we should not assign permissions to an individual user. The better approach would be assigning a user to a group and always setting the permissions to the group for a particular project, views, or data sources. And because we have denied permissions as well, so before applying the permission, we should always understand that instead of denying the permission, we should always have the approach of allowing the permissions, because there are certain roles, certain admin roles, which will always overrule the deny permissions granted by us. And the project leader permission, which is there on the project, it supersedes the other permissions because it has admin rights to the contents of the project. Now let us understand the default project. So in every site in Tableau, we have a default project, and which is again a template which has a sort of permissions already granted. So we generally use the default permissions to inherit maybe the permissions for the newly created projects. So suppose we create a new project on the server, then by default, it will have all the permissions which are there in the default project. And we cannot delete the default project, but we can just use the functionality because it has a certain set of permissions being granted, which acts as a template. So the default project I've shown here in the previous slides, like these are examples of the, okay, here, this one. So this is a default project if you see here. So by default, a certain, a rule has already been applied to the all users. And before we proceed, we should have the approach of setting it to none and then begin with need of our permissions. Yeah. Okay. So next is a locking mechanism. So locking of a project plays a very important role. And if I talk about the use cases, then it would be that suppose if we have a very highly sensitive data, then we should apply this mechanism of locking the project permission. And suppose, and the second would be like, because we understand that understanding permissions is very cumbersome and it is because it is very complex. So we would always want to have a simplified permission approach here. So in that case also we can lock the project, the permissions on the project. So we have a configuration, which I showed you on the right-hand side of the project, that we have for the project leader, we have a permission of locking the project. If you see on the project permissions, this particular thing, permissions for workbooks and data sources are managed by the owner. So here, when you click on this, you will get a dialog of locking the permissions or having it in a customized manner. So when you click on the dialog, you will see that we have a prompt of selecting either the logged permissions, the logged approach, or the customized. So like you see here, suppose if we are happy with the permission that we do not want any additional permissions for the workbooks or or at the view level or at the data source level, then we can keep the same permissions which are there in the project and have the content of the projects to inherit the permissions. Or we can even lock the permissions. So when we want to lock a permission, it can be applied to the nested projects also. And if you see that locking, it means that the permissions or the rules which are applied on the project, they cannot be modified. But in customizable configuration, we can do the modifications and it can be done by the content owners. That is the owners of the workbook, the owners of the projects, or the owners of the data sources. So here is a screenshot of this, that on the project level, under permissions, if you see, we have the option of locking, which is available on the right-hand side. So if we understand the difference, if we want to understand the difference between locking of a project and then customizing a project, the permissions for both, we see that when we lock a project, then the permission rules apply to the project. They are applied to the contents of the project, to the workbooks, to the data sources, and to the projects, to the nested projects if there are any. And only the permissions having the admin roles, like the administrators or the project owners or the project leaders, only they can do the changes for this locking on the locking permission. But if we have a customized project permission selected, then by default, of course, the nested projects or the content will have the permission rule inherited, but we can still do the changes. We can do the modifications in the content if we are the owners of the content. Okay, now we'll discuss the functionality of show or hide sheet tabs, which again plays a role in this permission part. Although it is not advised to use this, but still let us understand this thing, that whenever we publish, we have a particular workbook, we get an option of configuring the workbook as show sheets as tabs, which means when we publish it, we can have the workbook in a tabbed manner, in a tabbed view. So whenever this is configured, it means that the views in the workbook, they will inherit the permissions which are there applied on the workbook level. And if we do any changes to the workbook, then it will be reflected at the view level. But in the other case, suppose if we do not select this configuration, that we have a checkbox for it, like checkbox of configuring it as show sheet or hide tabs. So if we do not configure it, it means that by default, of course, the views will have the permissions on the workbook, but If in addition, we have any changes to the workbook permission, then those will not be inherited by the views. Okay. So these were the permissions available, the configurations available on the Tableau server. Now let us understand the permissions in the backend, that is in the database. So we have the database named as workgroup for Tableau server. It has different tables for the entities available in the server, like we have tables for group users, system users, then for the work groups, for the workbooks, for the data sources, for the projects, for the sites. And then if you suppose, we can even query it from the database using the joining conditions of the IDs and everything. But for permissions also, we have a table named as next gen permissions. So let us discuss the table. So we have this next gen permissions table, which contains all the permissions information for the Tableau server content. It contains information for the project, sites, workbooks, and data sources. But because here we are talking only about the project, so we'll just discuss these things: the project, workbook, data source, and view permissions. So by default, it will contain all the project permissions, which means permissions which are logged, I mean the logged permissions of the project, as well as the unlogged permissions. So I've tried to show it in using this Venn diagrams for the projects. So for the projects, we see that the permissions, this particular table, it shows the project permissions, both for the logged and unlogged scenarios, the parent project, and for the nested projects also. But for projects for which no permission has been granted, we will not be able to find it in the permissions table. So here I have tried to show in green that this is a disjoint set. No permissions have been assigned. So we will not be able to, so this will not be captured in the next-gen permissions. But here this table, it includes both unlogged and logged permissions for the project. Now, if I talk about the workbooks. So for the workbooks also, we have the entries there in the next-gen permissions table, but it contains the entries for the workbooks only from the logged projects. So here, if you see, we have the workbooks, which have workbooks can have different permissions apart from the permissions of the project, that is customized ones also. So here, if you see that some of the workbooks might belong to logged also, otherwise the permission should be unlogged. And this table, it also includes certain missing permissions. By missing permissions, which we mean that permissions which have been granted on the workbooks, but those workbook entries are missing from the table for the workbook, which is the workbooks table. So that is also captured under this permission table. And again, for workbooks which do not have any permissions assigned to them, they will not be captured in this table. For the views, we have similar thing, like again, it captures, see, understand we have the permissions for the views logged at workbook level also and the project level also. So typically we know that the next-gen permission table, it includes the unlocked permissions like we saw in the workbooks. So here also for the views, it includes the unlocked permissions, but it also includes certain logged permissions. And again, the missing ones are also there. By missing, again, we mean that it includes the permissions, the unlocked permissions of the views, and those views can be missing from the actual views table. But we have the permissions granted on those views. And again, it will not include the permissions which are not assigned to the views. So those views entries, those permissions on the views, because we do not have it, it will not be captured here. And that is why it is not here in this set. That is here. That is why it is here a disjoint set in green. So we have different tables here. In this particular session, I have not included the different approaches, like we can always, we can also access it, like I've shown you. We can do the configurations on that server. We can understand, we can view the permissions from the tables here. And we can also use the API methods. So we have different API methods API reference methods to understand the permission, to either add the permissions, to view the permissions on different entities. So I've not captured it here, but that is an interesting topic, and maybe in the next session we can capture that, permissions using API methods. So for that we have, I'll just give a little explanation. For that we have the API methods, we have the request body, then we have a tool, Postman tool, we can use that. Then we have to create the request body, run that, and then we will have a HTTP response, and then we can view the permissions. We can query the permissions on the workbook, query the permissions on the data sources, projects, sites, or understand that. Or maybe we can even add the permissions there. So that part can be captured later. So with the current session, the key takeaways, which I feel is that first thing would be understanding that the permissions which have been assigned should be for groups, not for individual users. And locking is an important concept. Like I said, for highly sensitive data, for having a simplified permission mechanism, we should always have the approach of locking the project permissions. We should have a proper planning for the permissions at the deeper level also, like at the view level, at the workbook level, at the data source level also, and understand the different options available. Whenever we publish a workbook, we should use published data sources. We should embed the passwords while publishing. We should do thorough testing of the permissions, and continuous review of the permissions is also very much needed, so that if anything is missed out or if something changes, then because permissions are very important thing, very crucial, so we should have a continual review of the permissions. And it is very important to educate the publishers so that they understand what permissions are required to provide to a particular content, and they can have a better control of the permissions and understanding. So this is all about the permissions and regarding the security of Tableau server. There are different topics also, like site roles, which is left here. We can again consider it in the next presentation. We can also, like I said, we can also understand the API methods to access the contents, to understand the permissions, to view. So those will be captured maybe later. So this was all about the Tableau server permissions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bhavya. So I think we just have one question. So there was a question like, what's the difference between editor and interactor?
Editor is like a developer. Interactor can just play with the workbook, like play with the dashboard. You can use the filters available on the dashboards, but an editor can do the changes, can do web edit, can save, or maybe refresh the schedules. So editor has all the permissions, but an interactor can just play with the workbook, can view it, can download the data, can download the images, can use the filters available. So these are the interactive permissions, interactive capabilities, I would say.
So there is one other question. Does Tableau have RLS kind of option as Power BI?
Yeah, we have this data security, row level data security also, we provide that. There are different, like I said, security can be accomplished in different ways, in different aspects. So here we were trying to just understand that security on that server, like with respect to the permissions part. There are different roles also. We have different site roles, data roles, user roles also, which also play an important role in the security. But here it was only just about the permissions part.
So what is the benefit of embedding password?
Embedding, okay. So when we embed the password, so we have two options when we publish the workbook. Either the viewer or maybe the interactor will have a prompt of providing the password. So when we publish a workbook, we have the option of either embedding it or having the prompt for the password, which means when you will access the workbook, you will get a prompt to enter the credentials of the data sources. So we want to avoid that. We just want the user to have a connection in the sense, just view the data, not connect to the data source and have the details there. So just if we embed the passwords, then the viewer can easily view the workbooks or the data or dashboards available on the server, and will not get a prompt to enter the connection or the information. So this is the difference here.
Okay. And what is the DAX equivalent here?
DAX
Like in Power
equivalent for?
BI. Power BI. So in Power BI we have DX, right?
Okay. So here it uses VisSQL. So here when like we create while we create measures or calculated columns in Power BI. So here also we have the option of creating calculations. So calculated field, and like on the basis of the type of field, again we have similar functions here while creating the calculations in Tableau. And on the basis of the type, it gets segregated into dimensions and measures. Like there we have measures and columns, calculated columns. So the functions, different functions for the different data type, for the string, date, everything, it is similar. Just that we use VisSQL here, and there we use DAX or mQuery.
So next is a controversial question. Do you think Tableau is better than the Power BI?
Okay, so I'll share my review as per my experience here. Initially, when I was working with Power BI previously, so I felt that the ETL part in Power BI is more robust or more empowering for the developers. But as when I started working Tableau extensively, I have understood that visualizations in Tableau plays a very important role. And here the visual effects are much better than the if I talk about the Power BI visuals. And if I talk about the ETL, so we can always connect Tableau to, we can use ETL tools like Alteryx, or maybe we can do modeling, or try to avoid the calculations in Tableau and have it in the backend. So we have different approaches of working on the ETL or working on the preparation part. But if I talk about the visualizations, then Tableau has better visualizations and better visual effects, better capabilities for the visuals.
Moreover, I think Tableau can handle more data than Power BI as of now. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if they increase that capacity for Power BI, but yeah,
Uh,
Tableau has capability of handling more data.
Also, Power being cloud based, I found that a
Yeah.
bit slower.
Okay, but I think a biggest advantage that Power BI has over Tableau is that it comes free with the Power, Microsoft Suite. So
Yeah, that is, of course, the license part is a major role. But if I just talk about the development part for the developers, initially, I mean, many people have the view that the ETL part is a major difference. I mean, that is there in Power BI, but the visualization is a important part in Tableau, which has more dominance as compared to on both of these. I mean, as compared to Power BI.
okay, so we have another question about Postman. So if we are considering Postman for API, how does the Akana token authentication takes place for the views to select the permission for the particular folder?
For this part, maybe I'll have a different session to answer this question, or maybe I can answer it later, if that is
Okay,
okay. Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will send you the answer. All the questions that are not answered on right now at the moment, we'll send you
Yeah.
separately, guys.
Sure.
So, what is the difference between the embedded and publish separately options of the
Publish.
passwords, embedded passwords and publish separately?
Basically, the data
Data
source
sources.
part.
The data sources, is it relevant to the data source, the question?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah, data source.
So data source, first thing would be where the data source can be embedded in the dashboard in the workbook, or we can publish it separately. So when we publish it separately, you'll have to provide the permissions, and that data source
So,
can be used by
yeah.
any other workbooks also.
Yeah, so
Yeah, go
basically,
ahead.
guys, if you do a embedded data source, the permissions of the owner, if the owner has a permission of a viewer or editor, the same permission will be copied to all the other guys who have the permission in the workbook. You don't need to give any other additional permissions to data source itself when you embed it. But if you do a separate publish, then you will have to give separate permissions to data sources as well as workbook. So that's the main difference. So I think we have answered this. So again, a very subjective question. How long does it take to master Tableau? So it's a very subjective question, I think.
So it
Actually, I
depends.
know
If you have understanding of any other tool, BI tool, then it will always be easy to understand some other tool. Like suppose if you have an understanding of Power BI, then you can very easily understand Tableau. And if you do not have an understanding of any BI tool previously, then you can start with understanding the data, like what is dimensions, measures, the different schema, the modeling of data, and then gradually you can start. So, or you can go through different trainings. It is an interesting thing, and it depends on how much time you're trying to invest in learning. So it depends on that as well.
So I think Lakshay is, still has just learned it. Tableau, Lakshay, your comments on this?
Tableau desktop. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I have no, so not
you have
recently, but
recently completed a certification, right? So
yeah, it's been almost an year, I would say. So,
yeah.
so Power BI or Tableau depends basically on your use case, on your organization's use case. If it would also depend on how much data you are working on and what all you want to achieve with your data. So I have always preferred Tableau basically because of its easy to use interface, I would say. Power BI also I have used, I find it very slow. That is what my main
Like these are
concern
personal
is.
opinion, guys.
Yeah,
So
so
Yeah,
I,
again, it depends on the experience of the projects also.
yeah.
yeah, so it
So
basically
yeah,
depends on what your requirement is.
yeah. So I think if you have learned Power BI, yeah, you have more, you are familiar with the kind of visualizations you have, the kind of charts you have. So you know the charts by name. So Tableau has this feature where you can just drop in the measures and dimension and tell the chart name, and then you'll get that chart. So obviously, if you have learned Power BI or any other visualization tool, it will be easier to learn Tableau because you have the knowledge of the charts. And so if someone doesn't know Tableau server, how to learn practically, any suggestion?
So yeah, I can suggest you with that. I have had worked on Tableau server as an administrator for like 2-3 years, for my past 2-3 years. So to start with, I would suggest you to, there is a complete documentation for Tableau server onto Tableau site. So if you go under support link of your Tableau site, so you will find a complete Tableau server documentation. So it is around 2000 pages. So either you can start with that, or better is I would suggest you to go through e-learning videos onto Tableau. So the link which we have already shared on this chart. So there are certain badges or learning paths. So if you want to learn for development bit, go for the data analyst or data scientist, whichever interests you. And if you are interested for server administration bit, there is a site administration, server administration path onto e-learning portal. So you can start with that. Also, any Tableau software, whether it is Tableau server or it is Tableau desktop. So you can download it for free for 14 days. So once you are done with the theory part, what you can do is you can download the Tableau server software. You can host it onto your personal server or AWS. You can host it onto your laptop as well. So you'll be free to use it for another 14 days. So that is how I would say you can start learning Tableau server from scratch. And if you have any issues, I think Bhavya and myself here, we have got a experience in Tableau server thing, so we would be able to help you with that. So you could reach out to us directly regarding that. So there is one person who has put up a question. I didn't get that. How one can use it for after 14 days? Can you please repeat? So it is free for initial 14 days only, guys.
So
After
it's get
14
like a trial
days,
period.
yeah.
You get,
So
for a
14 days
software.
is the trial period.
So maybe go to the trainings first, have an understanding, and then when you have the understanding of actually working on the dashboards, then you can just have the trial version and just utilize the 14 days time.
And does Tableau certification plays a major role in recruitment? So I think for this, as far as consultant roles are considered, as far as consultant roles are there, I think Tableau certification plays a major role there. So it's always better to show a badge or something to to show your learnings and everything. It's always better. I think it's again subjective to employers, but yeah, it's always better to show a certificate for your learnings now.
So certification, I would say, is basically when you are looking for a switch or something. If you're working within an organization and you have started learning Tableau, if you get a good hands-on, then I would say you don't need certification. You would need it only if you're looking for a switch or if you have recently started learning it. That is how a new employer would understand that you have that capability. So it is for that, I would say. But if you're already working on Tableau, then it's basically your interest if you want to challenge yourself and go for it. So Sai Mohan has put a question: what is stable Tableau desktop and server versions? It's always good to use one before the latest one, I would say, because all the issues and patches have already been released for that. So, like the latest version right now is 2020.2. So, if you are using it at professional level, then I would definitely suggest you to go for one lower than the latest version, which would be 2020.1. But if you are using it for your personal learning bit and everything, I would always suggest you to go for the latest one, as you would be able to learn the new features which Tableau introduces. So starting 2018 onwards, Tableau started uh, a new series of it version basically. So before that, it was Tableau 9, 10, 10.1, 2, 3, 4. Since 2018, what they have started is they release a version each quarter, and each quarter the version they release, it has certain new features. So it all depends for what you are planning to use. If you are planning to use it basically for learning and basically working on new data sources, exploring Tableau, I would always go for the latest version, which has the latest features. Sona has one question.
Yeah, any limitation on amount? Sona, so Tableau, I think there is not, but Tableau has this extension, like they have their special package called Hyper or TDE, and Hyper is kind of great, great compression package. So whenever you have big files, it will compress it to a small one in Hyper. So files as large as 10 to 20 GB are just like 2 to 3 GB in Hyper, and Tableau extracts are Hyper. So I think
so latest
that answers your question.
Latest format of extract in Tableau is .hyper.
So it's a compression package.
Yeah, so it is a compression
package. Compresses your files greatly.
And it is, I would say, quite an improvement over TDE. And there is no such hard-coded limitation on the amount of data you want to upload. Tableau desktop specialist certification. So it would be 50-50, I would say. So not completely practical, but you would have to interact with the dashboards to basically resolve the questions which they have given you. So I would say, like, I think I got 27 questions, out of which 19 were theoretical. So 19 were theoretical, and then there were 2 practical questions in which charts were already given as we get a virtual space or virtual desktop where we need to access this. So there is a data source already put up over there and a dashboard already built over there. What they ask is they will give you questions based on the how you interact with the dashboard, how you place the how you select the filters based on the questions. So, but there is no such development bit in the Tableau Desktop Specialist certification. There is nothing like you need to build a new dashboard.
I think there are many questions regarding the certification, Lakshay. So we can share with you all our recording for Delhi session where we had this discussion about certifications specifically.
Yeah, so we had a session from Sarah Bartlett, who is a Tableau ambassador, as well as she's leading London TUG. So we had a session from Sarah in May as a part of Delhi TUG event. So what you can do is either you can directly YouTube Delhi TUG Tableau sessions for May, or we'll also drop your mail after this event. So within next 2-3 days, we'll drop your mail with all the content which we covered, also with the link of recording for this current session. And we'll also put a link for Delhi TUG session, which had that session covered. So all the certification bit can be so for all the certification bit you can refer to that. I think we don't have any more new questions. Should we wrap up, Varun?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have the link for that session also. So guys, I'm pasting it in the chat. So you can go through this link. It has a second session of this meetup was on the certifications. So you'll get a better idea there. Plus, yeah, thank you, Bhavya. I think that was an insightful session.
Bhavya.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, guys. So we'll keep this channel open for 5 minutes to answer your questions. Until then, I'll share my screen if anyone wants to know our details.
Yeah, so any one of you, we would suggest you to nominate yourself in present in the upcoming sessions. It would be great for us. Don't be pushed back by that you have recently started learning and what you cover won't be up to the mark. Don't worry about that. We are here to share and help each other. So you can reach out to any one of us if in case of any issues, as well as reach out to us in case you want to present at either Chandigarh TUG session or our Delhi TUG session. And to stay updated, what you can do is we have a LinkedIn. We are on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. We have Chandigarh TUG and Delhi TUG WhatsApp groups. So we can add you over there. Also, Telegram group, and there is a community link under Tableau site. So what you can do is on Tableau site, go to the community section, look for Chandigarh TUG or Delhi TUG, and just join that link so that you stay updated for our upcoming events.
Okay, guys. So thank you all again for joining.
Okay, thanks Varun. Thanks Lakshay. Dropping off.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining on a Friday evening. Hope you have a great weekend.